Hello, sweethearts.
Hey,
Hi.
How are you?
good.
Good, and you?
Good.
Back,
Lisa,
back to normal life?
these two lovely people were just in pre-bit in Utah.
Awesome. Cool.
It was good. It was a really good time. So how are you all today?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah, I had fun yesterday paddleboarding and getting lost and having to swim upstream and push the paddleboard up with my kids and stuff, things I could never have done before because of the back stuff. And it was fine. No issues at all today, which is
Really?
incredible. Yeah,
Wow. That's
really cool.
amazing. So, I know I haven't looked at everything you posted on in the Slack,
Oh, no worries.
but so you said the very next day you told me your back was feeling stronger, right?
Yeah. It was very interesting. And then it took me a couple days to really kind of sleep, but then I'm sleeping pretty good now. So
Oh, okay. And the first night you texted me that you slept really well.
yes and no. I thought I did, but also I didn't. And like, I don't know, it was really weird. But when I slept, I would sleep really deeply, like so deeply. I've never slept like that before. And so trying to wake up out of that was like coming up out of mud. And I always wake up many times. Well, I used to wake up many times during the night, and it's always like not very deep sleep. So it's been really cool.
Oh, wow. So did you feel rested when you woke up then?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot more, especially today too.
So I didn't even really know about Keith's back issue. And but then at the end of pre-bit, I had an extra hour. And so I just started throwing everybody on the table. And when Keith came up, I just threw his symptoms into the circuit, and it came up with the sacrospinalis muscle and also longus capitis muscle. So those were the two muscles that I put in a circuit for him. And when I tell you that he literally couldn't come up off the table at all, during the test, specifically sacrospinalis. And then when we retested it, it was similar, Lisa, to your bit class in Boston, where I was doing your abdominal muscles and suddenly you just held yourself off the table. I'm sure you remember this day. That's what happened to Keith just the other day. And so when I put him back in that position for sacrospinalis, and I said, after the balance was done, I said, Keith, come up off the table. He just lifted his whole body off the table, and Leah McGonigal was her eyes just popped out of her head. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. And then after class, I did quadratus lumborum and also vastus medialis on Keith. So he says he's feeling great.
Yeah, I struggled to walk 2 miles, if that, normally. And it was yesterday was, I don't know, like 2-3 hours of just really pushing hard. And it was awesome.
That's great. I'm so psyched. And remind me, Keith, how many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids.
Okay. How old is the youngest?
The youngest is 12, pretty sure.
Okay, very good. Cool. Pretty sure the youngest is 12. Cool. And Tony's down here. Hey, Tony, how you doing? Good. Awesome. All right. Lisa already put some questions in the chat. She wants to elaborate on these balances that we have in the bit protocol. What other questions do you have? I promise I'm going to answer your question today, Lisa, because I know last time you asked me advanced questions and I couldn't quite get to them.
Not a problem. It's all good stuff.
Yeah. So I definitely want to talk about that. What other questions do you have today that you want to talk about, or successes or wins, or questions about how to deal with a client, anything like that?
I could list another success if you want.
Sure.
It was great for this morning. So I was still trying to not I was not quite sure about the surrogate type stuff, but I was going to try it anyway. So this morning my cat came in and he's normally like crazy active and just running in for treats or stuff. But this time he just came like hunched over and just kind of moving his back legs a little bit more and more and coming in. And then I was like, he looked like my sister's cat died just like a few weeks ago from like a bladder blockage and stuff. And he looked like that, just like hunched in. And it's like, oh, okay. So I tried to call over to the vets. No one was answering, or no one could take him for like a day or two. And my wife who wasn't necessarily a believer, but she's become more of a believer. She said, okay, just work on him. So I put him in, and his foot looked like it was kind of broken too. So I wasn't sure what was going on. But it took me to allergies and and when we got to the alarm points, took me to bladder. I thought, okay, this is coincidental. This is interesting. And so I worked on him, and we went through and did all that we needed to. And it was really interesting because he sat up and he started stretching a bit there, and he started moving around. And with like in an hour, he's moving all over the place. He's eating, he's drinking, he's doing all of this other stuff, and he's going out and he's still walking gingerly a little bit on that foot, but nothing like before. So that was huge.
That's awesome.
It was really, really cool.
So who else works on animals in this little group? Lisa, did you ever work on an animal?
No, we had a cat. I probably should, but I haven't.
Yeah. And Tony, did you ever work on animals?
Not with acupressure stuff, no.
Yeah. When I was in pre-bit, there was a guy who cured his dog of parvo during pre-bit class. And then a bunch of people work on horses and dogs and whatnot. And it seems to have just the most beautiful result. I normally don't work on animals. What were you going to say, Mariana?
I have somebody working my dog, and literally he's a different dog. He gets upset when my husband is not home, and he gets home, he literally goes crazy, like jumping and biting my husband, like goes crazy. And he was gone for 4 days, and the dog was so depressed. So I have somebody working on the dog, and when my husband got home, the dog was acting normal. And my husband's like, what's wrong with the dog? He didn't even say hi to me. So yeah, the lady told me that he was shifted. He had a trigger.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like animals, they feel brain integration and energy work in general just more strongly.
They say it's so easy to work on animals because it's so easy for them to let go. Just like it. They say animals can absorb the sickness of the owner, and the owner can get healed, and the animal can pass with the same sickness because they cannot share it.
Oh, wow.
If an animal cannot, it's like when the dog go in the water and goes out and shake, and all the water gets out. So if the animal cannot shake in the same moment of the trauma, that's it. It's stuck on him. Yeah. Wow. It's crazy, but it's so easy to work on them.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I can see how that would happen. There's like several times when somebody works on me, and like my cat, I remember actually outside of energy work, I was in a therapy session on Zoom, and I was going through something emotional, and I just felt this little paw on my shoulder. It was my cat. And he was like, oh, are you okay? Do you need a hug?
Every time my husband go to a Reiki session, the dog is always there. Yeah. Every single session, always there.
It's amazing how much they know, and they can put their paw or their hand right where it hurts.
Yeah.
And horses too. I don't work with horses, but I know they must be, and dolphins, of course, very.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's very cool.
I never would have thought of working on a dolphin. That's very interesting too.
They probably don't need it. They're going to work on us. All right. So let's see. Lisa, let's talk about these little balances here. So Keith and Mariana, I know you haven't taken this class, but we're going to talk about it anyway. And Tony, you've taken LEAP. Yeah.
I have only taken LEAP level 1 and then lots of SIPs.
Okay. So LEAP level 1 is like our pre-bit. So Lisa's questions are elaborate on these balances outside of the protocol. So the first one is limbic, CV17, physiology, GV17. So limbic, the whole limbic area of the brain, if this were the brain stem, sits on top of the brain stem like this. And it is so important because it's regulating all of our autonomic activity. So every time you blink your eyes, and how you sweat, and when you go to sleep, and when you get up, and if you pee or poop, and all of your emotions that are complex are housed in this one area, which is called the limbic system. So there are a few things out there that claim to rewire the limbic system, but outside of the full context of the brain, I can't really say that that's a huge improvement. I know for some people whose brains aren't working to change the limbic system, that's amazing. But in brain integration, we're going to go way past the limbic system into the other areas of the brain. But still, the limbic system is so important because it is housing all the chemical interactions that cause this autonomic nervous regulation, right? So every time my eyes dilate, the reason why they can dilate is chemical. And every time I feel an emotion or go into fight or flight, the reason why that happens is chemical. So in this particular sentence, we've got limbic, which is CV2324, and anatomy and gland. So when you put those 4 things in together into a circuit, you're getting into the limbic system. Now, for you who have only taken pre-bit, this is a little bit funny, but based on what I just described, you actually could balance somebody's limbic system right now. Because if
So
those,
just by accessing those and then anatomy and gland,
that's right.
and then we could get into there and start. And then what do we do from there? Just
Well,
start
so
working on stuff.
Say for instance, the client holds CV23 and 24, and remember, we're using a neutral touch. So the client will have a thumb here, which is a neutral touch, and then 2 fingers here, which is a neutral touch.
Yeah.
And then you, as the practitioner, hold anatomy and gland. So when that happens, those 4 points, you put them in your pause lock as one piece.
Yeah.
You step out right then. And so if you get an indicator change here, like the muscle goes on lock, the entire limbic system is off.
Okay.
That's huge. That is huge. Just that component. And then you can look around for an emotion or a gland, right? Based on what you did, or a chakra, based on what we did in pre-bit last week. So you could literally turn on somebody's limbic system, knowing only what you know from pre-bit.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I would go around and start checking, whose limbic system is on and whose is off, and start fixing it. So
Okay.
then the next point is CV17. That's right in the middle of the breastbone. Now, when we come to brain integration, this is the spot for the hypothalamus. And so the hypothalamus is kind of like a conductor organ. It's a conductor gland telling the other glands what to do and putting out chemicals of its own. And that is the point for it. So inside of limbic, CV17 is hypothalamus. And then you're going to hit physiology mode. Why do we use physiology mode? Because that's the chemical part. So the anatomy is what the thing is. The physiology is how it works. And that's more important to us than anything else.
So you go into this limbic mode, and then you go down into the CV17 and physiology mode.
That's right.
And that gets to the emotional part, or the chemical part.
Exactly. And so then Lisa's asking about these 2 points on the back of the head. GV17 technically is right here.
Okay.
It's the most posterior portion of the skull. And I think of this as focus, Lisa. So when I use this balance, I think of it as focus, and I can actually predict what is happening for the client. So when we do this in brain integration, we don't just use 1 point, GV17. We use GV17 slightly to the right and GV17 slightly to the left. And what that means is that, hi, Bashava. So,
hi, how are you?
Good, nice to see you. So
Same here.
when we have GV17 in that circuit, we're looking at the focus for each hemisphere. And so we've got, if the client is got logic on the left, and that's the point that's off, you can tell that they lose focus when it's a logic task. And if you say that to them, they will agree with you. If GV17 on the right is off in this sentence, and they have Gestalt on the right hemisphere, They lose focus when things are too amorphous, when they're too big and they don't have enough structure, they lose focus. And you can adequately predict this. So when someone's on my table, I don't even know them, and I touch these points, I can tell when they don't have focus. Even odder is when both points are off, and I get to say to the client, it's hard for you to focus all the time, no matter the content. And they'll usually say that that's correct.
How do you fix that? What do?
You
Just
put
do
it
the same things?
exactly. You just do the frontal occipital hold.
Okay.
Right. So now, even though you haven't taken anything other than pre-bit, you can do this balance. So let's try it again. It's limbic. So they hold this,
okay,
and you hold anatomy and gland.
So if I'm doing it surrogate mode, I do this, lock it, and then do the anatomy and gland as well.
Right. That's right. And then CV17 and physiology, you put that in, stack it. And then the points you're testing is GV17 back here. And it's the most posterior part of the skull. It's the part that sticks out right before the divot.
Okay.
Okay.
Right before the divot there.
So
okay.
I think of this as focus. And it's in the same sentence as motivation when we get into the bit protocol. So you have these two things kind of in the same area that are essentially the same wire. One is motivation and one is focus, and they go directly together.
So doing that does focus and motivation at the same time?
Motivation is technically a different balance, but it's in the same section. So okay. Lisa, is this what I'm supposed to be getting at? Is this what you're alluding to?
Yeah, I've heard you mention different things about these in the past, and I just thought I wanted to understand it better so that it might find more use for it too. Aside from just going through the protocol, boom, boom, boom. How does this relate to memory?
Well, it's funny. A lot of people do come to me and say, I have a memory problem. And what I find as I'm rewiring the brain, it's actually an intake problem. It's an intake problem. It's in the eyes or in the ears, but the memory works fine. Right? So when we're doing the regular bit protocol, when we get limbic CV20 is how we get into the parahippocampus, which is transferring memories from short-term to long-term. And a lot of times that part works okay, but it's the eyes that aren't working or the ears that aren't working. So if you can't focus on something long enough for the parahippocampus to transfer it from short-term to long-term, then it's not there. Not going to be there. And you may, if you don't know much about the brain, wrongly assume you have a memory problem.
Do you have to do limbic and then you do CV physiology and CV20, or is that?
So that would be limbic, CV20, and then
CV20
physiology.
And physiology, okay.
Yeah, limbic physiology will come after that. So there are a lot of people out there who are reading or taking in information from the world where their eyes aren't taking in the right thing. And they'll say to you, meet me at that restaurant, the one that starts with an L, right? And maybe they don't know. I'm just going to mute you for a second.
I'm trying to mute. I don't know how.
Okay, give me 1 second. She's cute as a button, though. There we go. Looks like you're muted now. Okay, so we've all had those friends who are like, meet me at that restaurant on the corner. You know, the one that starts with an L. Lombardo's or Luigi's or something like that, right? So the brain sees the big L, that's the first part, but literally does not read the rest of the word. Right? And so then when they relay that information, they say, meet me at that restaurant. It starts with an L. The sign is green. And then when they get there, they're going to say, oh, Lombardo's. My memory is awful. I didn't remember the name of it. But in truth, they never actually took it in. And this happens a lot during reading comprehension, a ton, right? Which is why when I fix reading comprehension, I start at the lowest grade level possible. And for me, usually that's 3rd grade. And so what I notice is that regular adults who have okay reading comprehension are not reading. Their eyes are skimming the page. They are skipping over words or dates, depending on how their brain works, or skipping over the little details. Maybe they can say, okay, this person was born in 1808. This is how you spell their name. But I have no details about their life at all because that data isn't definitive. It's like he felt this way. So even though it's in part of the story, the brain doesn't pick it up. So I find a lot of time it's an intake problem. So when these balances are off, specifically with focus, it's going to affect memory, because if you cannot focus on what is in front of you, you cannot transfer it from short term to long term, and then it cannot come out. That's how it works.
Funny thing with, sorry.
Let me just understand. Lisa, am I understanding your question?
Yeah, you are. And so if you have someone who has ADD, then this is a particularly important balance for them.
Absolutely. Anybody with ADD, this is so important to get them to focus, whether it's focus on folding their laundry or making sure that the food doesn't get burnt, or focusing on the actual task, which is usually academic.
And that would be the same thing as that they do this. Oh, and now they got to go over here and do this. And I can't pay attention to this because it doesn't interest me. So I'm not going to do it.
Okay, so now that is where the motivation comes in, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
classic conditioning, straight out of the Green Book, says that you have to either love a subject in order to study it, or you have to be afraid of the punishment of not studying it. That's classic psychology for learning. You either have to love it, or you have to be so afraid of being punished that you learn it. That's pleasure or punishment.
Okay.
And motivation is going to be one of those. So sometimes I talk about pleasure as a motivator, meaning I love this subject and I love to learn about it, or punishment as a motivator. If I don't learn this subject, I'm literally going to get beaten with a strap. That's how my household was. Right? I got hit with a belt. So you're darn straight I tried to learn those things. I got hit with the buckle end of a belt.
Oh my God.
Not a comfortable area. So that motivator is either pleasure or punishment. But in brain integration, what do? We just wipe that whole slate clean, so you don't have to be motivated either through pleasure or punishment in order for your brain to learn it. We're going to wipe that whole thing clean. So whether or not you like a subject or hate it, or hate a subject but have a good teacher, which is common, it doesn't matter. Your brain, it will just go in.
So if you have, like I have a kid who's 19, I've just finished the protocol with him. So I've given him a whole bunch of homework and I'll see him in a couple months. And he's, it's like, he's like, well, if it's not interesting to me, then why do I want to bother with it? Right. And his reading comprehension has soared through the protocol. But this issue of getting interested in people or things he's not done is just kind of interesting to me. and this kind of seems to fit in with that.
Absolutely. And so people will say that. You'll say, how's your reading comprehension? And they say, oh, it's great as long as I'm interested in the subject.
Right. Yeah.
That's the exact minute you know you're going to help them. Right?
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Because at that exact minute, their brain can't learn something unless they like it. Raise your hand if you like taxes. Right. Raise your hand if you have to pay them. Exactly. So there are all these times in life where you have to do something that you don't necessarily like, right? Raise your hand if you like laundry. Some people do. I don't particularly.
I
but
do.
Some people, yeah, Mariana, she likes it. But isn't it something you have to do, right? Kids really don't like brushing their teeth. Adults do because they want to keep them. But so how can we get the behavior to reflect habit without motivation? And so in that sense, I'm saying like good motivation, what we would consider good motivation and bad motivation, right? Either pleasure or punishment. It's a unique thing. So people will say, of course I can, I do well in every subject that I'm interested in. Well, that's not the area I'm going to fix. I'm going to fix the areas you're not interested in, where you're not getting good grades. That's where it's really going to shine. That's where my tool is going to come across.
Okay, so they become somewhat neutral then. In other words, okay, I've got this, I'll do it.
That's
And
right. They become
don't think
neutral.
about it so much.
They
Yeah.
become absolutely neutral, at which point classes that are required for young adults, kids and young adults, become easy, even if you don't like the content. Right? That's a miracle. That is a miracle for every single person. So I have two quick stories about that. One is that the first story is about me. After my mom passed away, I was very depressed, but a friend of mine gave me a book on the Kaddish, right? This prayer that you say for your parents for a full year after they pass away is a traditional Jewish prayer. I am not Jewish, but she gave me this book. The book is about 600 pages. The whole book is just a timeline of what rabbi said what. In 1400, this rabbi said this. In 1430, this rabbi said that. And it's all about the Kaddish and when you're supposed to say it, but it's just from the point of view of the rabbis. It was not an interesting book to me. The weird thing is, I read it cover to cover. Cover to cover, I read this book. And I never was upset that I didn't really like the content. My eyes just went over the page. And there was this little voice in my head that said, well, there's probably some gems in here somewhere. I'm just going to keep reading it until I find all these gems. And there were tons of gems. I didn't know anything about this prayer. I didn't grow up Jewish, but I learned a lot. And it really, really helped me. Right? It's really cool to have that. And then I can think of all sorts of different stories of clients, where they say like, oh yeah, the one I wanted to tell you was I had a client who was born in Singapore. She was beaten by her parents with a large stick that they call a roatan, which is common for them. And then she escaped to the United States. She became a Yankees fan. She is the most New York Singaporean you have ever seen. Like, she speaks as if she's from New York. First of all, she's a Yankees fan and lives in Boston. There is no more bigger rivalry in all of baseball than that, right? And she was reading for me during reading comprehension, and she couldn't even get the words in her head because she's arguing with the text in her mind. In her mind, she's saying, I don't believe in this text. I don't like the way this person is writing. Why did they put a comma there? That should be a semicolon, blah, blah, blah. Zero reading comprehension. None. She's so used to fighting mentally, and she's a very, very powerful lawyer. She's so used to fighting with the text that she can't comprehend a darn thing. If I put my third grade reading book about bats in front of her, she's arguing with it the whole time. So how much can she comprehend? And when she's a lawyer and reading giant documents that are 200 to 300 pages, what actually is she comprehending? She's actually just projecting all of this negativity onto the text, which is not even a person. So I erased that for her. And then she got partner in that law firm because she's the only one who could read and speak Chinese. And so she's the intermediary between an American law firm and a Chinese law firm. And that was the end result of her brain integration.
And is that something that you just found gradually, like you did all these different things and it just ended up that way? Or did she have a few key things that were?
There were definitely key things that were off. I use the AFPCC significantly here, which is the back door of the limbic system, of the amygdala specifically, because she was in so much fight or flight from being hit. But Lisa, you've seen me go through reading comprehension where I'll take it apart sentence by sentence if I don't think your comprehension is high enough, right? I'll have you read it to me and then relay it. And inside of all that is where I discovered she was actually having a dialogue while reading. So if you can imagine that, the ears are hearing what's happening up here. And sorry, just give me 1 second. I almost thought this Zoom got canceled. All right, so you're literally listening to something happening in the brain. And at the same time, the eyes are going on the page. Okay, that was the intake. But the brain records linearly. You know, so it's as if I was reading this book, you know. Here's a book, 500 critical reading essays. And so say I'm reading it and my brain is recording, many doctors today treat a patient, oh my God, I can't believe how loud that is outside and the sun is really bothering my eyes, of 75, the same way that they would treat, I'm a little thirsty, a 4-year-old patient. Right? So what I said to you just now is that, sorry, I was reading this, but also being aware of what else was happening. And I said it all at the same time. And that's the way your brain records, is linearly, which is why you can remember the alphabet of all things. It's ridiculous, but true. The alphabet is recorded linearly. That's why when you file things, even though it's an L, your brain goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and then you put it where the L goes. Because it's linear. You don't just go, oh, L, it's right after K. Nobody would do that. I don't even know if that's right. Nobody does that because it's recorded linearly. Same thing with saying the alphabet backwards. You think that's actual skill, but it's not. You just recorded something in a different order. So when I realized in reading comprehension that it wasn't getting better, I started to ask 100,000 questions. Why is this not working? Oh, you're having a dialogue in your head while you're reading? Well, there's the first problem. And I think, of course, I use sight mode and sound mode at the same time there. Right. And then it got better and better and better to the point where she could read these, you know, law documents in Chinese.
With the sight mode and sound mode, were you just putting that in and checking to see if she was on or off? Or
that's right. So using
just
essentially sight and sound to make sure reading comprehension comes up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if she can't do that, if those things are turned off, then you just frontal
throw it in a
hold.
circuit and hold her head. That's exactly right. So Lisa, I know I went off a little bit. Am I understanding your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So the next one there, I think you wrote organ CV24 rip and lip CC bridge. Is that true?
Yep.
And is that from the speech points? Is that what you heard?
That's the speech points, but I've heard you mention something about it before where I thought, oh, there's probably something more about this than just a speech point. And also, no, I was thinking of somewhere else it was showing up, but yeah, so that I just thought maybe this is important to understand a little better.
So when we fix the speech points on the side of the head, just a refresher is you've got this right and left audio integrative point. Then you have what is called the AIP audio, the actual audio integrative point. Then you have Wernicke's area, which is where you decide what you want to say, and it's where you understand what somebody else says, and it's where you understand what you read. And then you have Broca's area at the front, and that's what moves your mouth and your tongue and your larynx and your pharynx. So when we get into those speech points, we're using organ at CV24, and you remember that's the brain as an organ. And then we're going to use those integrative points that are right behind the ear on the mastoid bone. I think it's gallbladder 14, I think. And the bridge. That's really important, isn't it? So some people used to, the way that Susan used to do this is that she would balance the wire going up to the bridge, but not the bridge itself. And everybody thought that was dumb. So now we balance the whole thing because we need the information to cross the corpus callosum. If it doesn't cross the corpus callosum, you've got a problem, right? You're not going to be understanding the larger implications or the smaller implications of that thing, depending on which hemisphere is working. So I think organ at CV24 is really important anyway. This is the first balance in Nancyology. And the way that I was taught that actually is that for me means neurotransmitter. I don't say that in class, and I didn't say it in my video because I don't have a way to corroborate that information. But I took pre-bit from Dr. Shalise Pratt, and she taught me that balance, which is why I use it. So organ at CV24, what other way could we read that wire? So you might read this wire saying like the actual, well, first of all, it says the actual structure of the speech points. That's what the wire says. It says the organ in the brain that is the speech point and the bridge. That's what the wire says. But the organ itself is of no use unless it works, and that part is chemical and glandular. So I think in this particular sentence, and specifically in the Green Book when Susan writes it, is we're talking about the actual physical structure of the thing. And we know that people who have had learning difficulties often have some type of head trauma, whether it's a concussion or high or low forceps, deprived oxygen at birth, antibiotics during the birth, difficult pregnancy, candida during pregnancy or birth, something like that.
So these points, so they have more, particularly lip and rip, but they have to do with more things than speech, don't they?
Yes. In the next question you're asking about limbic CV17 lip and rip, they specifically mean the hippocampal commissure. Is that what you mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they're not like, you know, the 3 points here on for speech are clearly speech, but lip and rip, I always sort of think of them as the supervisors, but they do more.
Yes, absolutely. So they're controlling all of speech in a single hemisphere. And when we look at that third balance that Lisa put in the chat, which is limbic, CV17, this time no physiology, lip and rip, and CC bridge. This is the balance for the hippocampal commissure. The hippocampus is transferring from short-term auditory to long-term visual. And that is why you make a picture in your head of something you heard, and is the #1 marker for learning difficulty. So they are absolutely more like the manager of the full point, right? And so if this point is off here, rip, these points are not going to work very well. And similarly, if lip is off, these points will not work very well.
Do you hold those all at the same time there, or do you just do
will
it
in the
one at a
protocol.
time?
In the
Okay.
protocol, you balance each one individually and each pair.
Okay.
Or each combination. They're not always pairs. There could be 3.
Okay. And do you do them at the same time, like this way as well?
Yeah, and when you finally see all the balances that are possible here, if you use priority mode, you can, because there's something like 49 connections here. So if you use priority mode, you can get down to the guts very easily. What were you about to say, Lisa?
Oh, I was just going to say that's why we do these ones first. We do lip and rip first, lip, you know, or lip, rip, and then lip and rip together.
That's exactly right. That's why we do them first. And if you're short on time, those are the ones you do, right? So we've got organ and anatomy, CV24, lip and rip, and the bridge. And then we've got organ and anatomy, CV24, all 4 points on both sides, and the bridge. Those are kind of the bookends of the entire speech section, right? But if this hippocampal commissure isn't working, and you can't see a picture in your head of what it is you're reading, even if you're unaware of that picture, because it could be subconscious, then you will not have reading comprehension, right? It's not going to work.
What was that last one you did? CV24, and then
it's all 4 points: lip and rip, audio
Lip and
indicator point, Wernicke's area, Broca's.
Okay.
On both sides.
Okay. But the first one was just lip and rip.
That's right. And then we always use the bridge because we're always going to use the
On
corpus
both of those,
callosum
okay.
there. Yeah.
But we don't need to do the corpus callosum neuromuscular because we're just looking at the logical side of things crossing.
Right. So Keith is bringing up a good point. We're using the bridge here, which is the cortical level of the corpus callosum. But I have had students and practitioners suggest to me, why not use CCNM? Why not use CCNM? If the problem is you can't get the words out of your mouth, wouldn't that be CCNM? So I have had some practitioners suggest to me that maybe we should be checking CCNM in those balances. You know,
do
you
the
get
full brain pack there.
you could absolutely do the full brain pack there. Keith is just noting that if you did the brain pack, you would automatically have CCNM in that set. And so if you've got somebody who's stumbling over words or stuttering, or has trouble moving the tongue or the teeth, or maybe they're tongue tied or something like that, couldn't we use CCNM and still get a change? It's interesting to think about it that way.
Well, that makes sense. And what I do is when I'm done with a circuit, like it has everything else it needs, and I ask, do I need anything else? It says no. Then I go and check the brain pack, because sometimes it doesn't, I need one of those and it doesn't say that. So I've separated them and just say, okay, always check to see if it needs the brain pack and throw that in, any part of that in. That works.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. And so isn't it nice to have the brain pack like that? So
And-
when Susan writes in the pre-bit manual and she puts, or even in the bit manual, and she puts brain integration at the beginning of the sentence, she's really cutting off the amount of data she can grab by putting the brain integration mode first. And that's really why I prefer to have it at the end of the sentence.
Is this something you could do through surrogate mode as well, or does it
Yeah.
have to be physically? Okay.
That's
awesome.
right. And so let's just go over that because I know you posted that in the Slack channel. So surrogate
this-
mode is your thumb over
Oh,
the
okay.
nail of your ring finger. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
And so when you start with your feet together, you hold this mode and you think about who you're going to surrogate for. I'm surrogating for Liz. Then you step out. Now that's in a circuit. But every single time you have to redo that. So that was a good one. We have a new Slack channel. It's called FSBI, which stands for Full Spectrum Brain Integration. Keith, do you have the link to our Slack?
I can get it and put it up.
That'd be great. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to get my water.
Yeah, what's the
I think
website
it's-
for that?
I think it's just FSBI Slack.com. This is the workspace, I believe. Oh my goodness gracious. FSBI.slack.com. That's what I believe it is. So if you go to slack.com.
Oh, okay. That's new to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are trying a whole bunch of different platforms. And so in GEMS, in the administrative side, we use Slack. And in Full Spectrum Brain Integration on the administrative side, we use Slack. So we're trying just different forums for different people, what they can, you know, if it works for them. It doesn't work for everybody.
And did you say that was SF as in Frank?
Yeah, I posted in the chat there. So
great.
fsbi.slack.com.
Great.
And then you just sign up and
Oh,
it should bring you in. So
Yeah. And so you can get this on your phone. FSBI is my business, Full Spectrum Brain Integration.
Okay.
So that is very cool. All right. So when Lisa posted in the chat about that balance, about the hippocampal commissure, I actually think is the most important balance in all of brain integration, right? So it's limbic, CV17, lip and rip, CC bridge. And that opens up what is called working memory. That's how you're going to be able to see something in this holographic space. Because working memory is not a spot in your brain. It's holographic in nature. It doesn't exist, but you see it in 3D. Is that blowing everybody's mind? That is so
Yes.
cool, right? So when I'm looking at how does this work for me? When I designed my garden, I can see it in 3D. I know exactly what wood I'm going to use, where I'm going to drill the holes. I can manipulate the thing all back and forth. In carpentry, we have a thing called joinery, where two pieces of wood come together. They never come together at an angle. It's always overlapped on one area, or you need to reinforce it on one side. I was a carpenter for a long time, and I can see it in my head and I can manipulate it around. So for 2, 3, 4 days, my brain is contemplating, where am I going to put that screw? What do I need to buy at Home Depot that can make my garden work? And because I'm looking at it in my working memory and I can turn it all around and I've had brain integration, I know exactly what to do before I ever draw it out. And this happened with a lot of people. One person who did this was Nikola Tesla, right? Tesla went through all of his scientific experiments in his mind, and many of them in a lucid dream state where he could literally maneuver it. The reason why you can see it is because you're in working memory, and working memory is holographic in nature. Cool. What else?
And relate that to why this is the entry into the fear section.
So the reason, that's such a great question. So the reason why this setup is both for working memory and for the fears is because fear is the one emotion that will shut off the bridge. That's why. Fear is the emotion that will turn your corpus callosum off. And it does that on purpose so that your reptilian brain in the brainstem can be in charge. It gives you a lobotomy. It cuts you right down the middle and says, no more thinking. You're not allowed to think. We're in fight or flight now. Right? And so when we use all the fear sentences, fear of making mistakes, fear of getting it wrong, fear of failure, fear of success, those are the fears that are quite literally stopping us from learning.
How do you get into those fear modes?
So you do the same thing, limbic,
Uh-huh.
CV17, lip and rip, CC bridge. That's a balance by itself. That is the hippocampal commissure. And then next time you come back to check it, you put in the exact same format, just like I said. And then you ask the person to say fear of, and whatever fear you want to remove. So you're going to learn that all in bit 1. So we do fear of failure, fear of success, fear of making mistakes, and fear of getting it wrong. But we add many, many, many fears to that depending on the client.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Lisa?
It does. And I'm just thinking, when you're elaborating on this, this working memory and so on, is it a good idea to maybe do this in the beginning of the Olympic system?
I think so. I think that I think this balance is the most important. And it's written so poorly in the Green Book that I didn't do this balance for the first 3 years I was certified. It's embarrassing. That is embarrassing to me, that it was not, the importance of it did not come across to me. But it is the wire that allows you to see in your head. And for learning difficulties, there's no wire can even come close to this in terms of just changing a learning difficulty. So you could say that as soon as you get into limbic, you could fix this first.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. There was one time when, in the Green Book, it says you have to balance everything in order. And Susan had said that to me. And then when she sent out our progressive checklist for my bit 1 class, it was out of order of what you see in the Green Book. And she started with CV1 and then went through down to CV20. And everybody was up in arms because they said, doesn't this have to be in order? And what she really wanted to get across is you have to do the sections in order, right? So like specifically limbic before the eyes, but also, you know, deep level switching and corpus callosum first before you get into anything else, which is why eventually it sticks, right? Cool.
Yeah, I always do the sections within limbic by priority.
Yep.
And it's usually the recall section is what usually, it doesn't always, but usually shows up first. But I do, you know, I do the breakdown of the limbic, like you were saying. Let's get, you know, not organ, anatomy, gland, CV23, CV24, balance that whole thing. And then go into each of the different sections. But this makes sense to maybe just do this one first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what Lisa's talking about there is the setup for limbic is CV23 and 24, anatomy and gland. But you can, first of all, understand, are the acupoints working? So just the points, CV24, CV23, are those points working? Do they work together if I put them in a circuit? Is anatomy by itself working? Is gland by itself working? Is anatomy and gland by itself working? And there are quite a few pairs here, right? CV24 and gland, CV24 and anatomy, CV23 and gland, CV23 and anatomy. You kind of like get down your own pattern for how to go through those things. And then you want to do triples. CV23 and 24 with anatomy, CV23 and 24 with gland, anatomy and gland with CV24, anatomy and gland with CV23. And so Lisa's talking about this real advanced fine-tooth combing of the brain. And so Lisa's been practicing for several years, and we get similar clientele that is extremely difficult to take apart. Extremely difficult. You know, these are not just basic protocols. These are people who have multiple diagnoses, who are coming from other practitioners where it didn't work, and we've got to fix them, right? Cool. And
Can I ask about the deep level switching? I know that's part of the other thing, but that's where you flip them the right brain, left brain around and front and back, right?
Deep level switching refers to what is the XYZ axis of the brain. And so the x-axis is right-left switching, and that means literally that information goes to the wrong hemisphere. So when I go to math class, the information is going into the picture side. And when I go to like English class, the information goes to logic.
How do you fix that? Like, what's the thing?
It is double touch at CV10. So CV10, where they put their figures on top of yours. And then K27 is for right left. CV24 and GV26 is top bottom.
Okay.
And then CV8 and GV1 is for front back. And you learn that in bit 1. Each one is a separate balance, but literally these are the 3 main ways that any wire can be running. So you're fixing all the wires right to left, and all the wires top to bottom, and all the wires front to back at once.
Top to bottom.
Yep.
The CV10 and with the double touch there.
Yep. So CV10, so double touch at CV10 is the formatting for deep level switching.
Okay, so that's the start for it all.
Yeah. And so if that's off on somebody, you know, Keith, fix it now.
Okay.
You
So that's the
bit 1. He's just going to go randomly fixing people.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing. So that's the start there. And then this is the top and bottom. What was the left and right again?
Left and right is K27s.
K27s. Okay. Left and right. K27s.
Yep.
And then the
front back is
CV8.
CV8 and GV1. Governing vessel 1 is right where your tailbone is.
Okay, and that one is not top and bottom. That's not left and right. That is
front back.
Front back.
Yeah.
And back. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so very much.
My pleasure. What other questions are there? Any question on any content, any client?
Trust balances. Is there a time when you shouldn't do that?
No. Trust balance? No.
Yeah. Always do that. Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. What else? What other questions? Any client, any content?
AFPCC.
Yeah.
Do you typically do that with people just by itself right off? I mean, I put it in a lot of balances, but I don't always do it by itself.
Yeah, it's a tough one to understand by itself because that's really a rabbit hole situation because of the setup. So, sometimes I actually muscle test, do I need to do the setup for AFPCC? And so I'll go through it just like with limbic, doubles, single points, and then doubles and triples, and then all of limbic together, and then plus CV14 and fizz should be the setup for AFPCC. And so sometimes I'll ask the muscle if I need to work somewhere there. There was a time in my career where I went through the AFPCC painstakingly, and I fixed all the points and all the doubles and all triples and quadruples and quintuples, and then made sure nothing was showing. And then I put that at the beginning of every sentence. I didn't know if that would be more effective.
You put that at the beginning. You put AFPCC at the beginning of a balance.
Yep.
And then you go into whatever balance.
That's right. So
And
there
you
was,
do that. Why?
well, I had these clients who had multiple diagnoses where I couldn't really get it to stick, and they were having a lot of symptoms that were just very difficult to deal with. Now there is a diagnosis for what was happening, and that is PANS and PANDAS. It didn't exist before. So what I was doing was flushing out the AFPCC. So flushing out limbic, and then flushing out limbic plus CV14, and then flushing out limbic, CV14, and fizz, and then flushing out every single point along the AFPCC. And then I would actually add that to the beginning of a sentence to cross-reference the protocol with the AFPCC. So it's the exact same thing Susan did in pre-bit when she put brain integration mode before the allergies. She was saying, how do these allergies affect brain integration mode? I'm sorry, how do the allergies affect the brain integration of this individual? And so what I did there was, how does the AFPCC affect the protocol of the individual, instead of putting it at the end? It was very painstaking though. It was
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing my little panda girl next week, so I might do that. Cool.
Yeah. And I think with her, probably cross-reference for pathogens, right? I wasn't doing that at the time, but I would do that now. What other questions or comments? Trying to think if I've had any really good cases lately. Everybody does so well, it's hard to pick one out of a hat because everybody, their SAT scores go up, every single score goes up. My adults just like nail it from here to the moon and back. I have a lot of high performing clients who are under a lot of stress. And so when you do brain integration on them, they actually get more touchy-feely. That's kind of an odd outcome, or one we wouldn't think of, but like my clients who are logic dominant, overachiever workaholics, they start to see their emotions a lot better and start to take a lot better care of themselves, which can be an odd transition for them to calm down. Yeah.
I have a little 15-year-old girl who's behaving like a 15-year-old girl, but also I just learned yesterday from her mother that she's just going berserk eating bad food, and then that turns into behavior issues. And I thought, wow, I need to look at the pathogens and recheck Candida because she's been away for a week and, ate whatever she wanted to, because the mother notices a difference, but the girl also has a lot of issues, a lot of developmental delays. She has an extra chromosome, and not Down syndrome, but something else. And the mother has that too, but has no symptoms. But I think she's really, really bright. And but she struggles with sequential things. Like if you try to give her 5 steps to do, she can't do it. She's just, so that's one of her biggest issues. And I'm at the point now, I'm almost finished the Olympic system with her.
Right.
And I've done all the regulation, all the C21 through 24 and all of that with her. So she felt much better after the very first session. So.
Oh, good. I can't wait to see, where, it sounds like, once you get to sequencing in the puzzles, that probably is where that will open up.
Oh, okay, right.
Where I love to do is sequence people's lives. I don't know if I showed that in your class, but the sequencing cards are really cool because it shows us, like 6 snapshots along a timeline. So say for instance, the person lays down to make a snow angel, and so it shows each particular step. And so sequencing is really important when you want to achieve a goal, and it is where the logic mind really comes into play. In order to, say, buy a house, there are all these different things you need to do in the right order. And so that's what sequencing will open up. But what I like to do is ask the client what type of goal they have, and then the steps to make that goal. And so what I'll do is I'll write it down on a piece of paper, kind of clandestinely behind them as they talk. And then I go back to my teacher's roots. I legitimately get out a scissor and I cut it up. And I'll put a whole pile of tiny papers in front of them and I'll say, okay, sequence your life. And that's where the glitch is right there, And then they'll start to put things in order. And what you start to see is, rather than an adult's life being just beginning to end, A to Z, there are different subcategories, and there might be tasks that fit in several places, and there might be tasks that only go in one section. And so once they start to realize they can really put their pieces of little paper anywhere, they start to understand the different components. And I think that's very powerful to sequence their life, whether they want to get into a college, record a musical album, trade money in the stock market, or even as their parents are aging. It goes in order. Like and that's one of those hardest parts with emotional stuff that we don't normally see, is that when your parents are aging, it feels very emotional, but there are logic things involved, like who has the medical power of attorney? Where is the will? When those things are in place, it makes everything a lot easier, but usually the people can't see that because of the emotional part. So it's a really important sequencing.
For example, the mom says she tries to give her a really simple dinner. The mother is in a wheelchair. She's crippled with RA. So the girl has to do a little bit more. And there's other kids too, but the mother gives her an extremely simple recipe for dinner. And she said it takes her about an hour and a half when it should take her about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
She just can't get through the sequence. So
did you try putting the logic hemisphere in a circuit by itself?
Oh no, that's interesting, because what I've noticed is when I'm checking the brain pack, I've noticed that the left hemisphere by itself showed up a lot to go into a balance, but I don't think I ever did it by itself.
So maybe try that if you're not getting anywhere. Just left hemisphere or logic hemisphere and see what's going on there. If it's unlocked, boy, get all over that with your pathogen pack. And then use the AFPCC there.
Okay.
See if you can get logic to come online, because it sounds like you have to turn it on in each balance. Is that true?
Well, when I scan the brain pack, that shows up a lot.
Right. So
Maybe nothing else, just that.
so maybe in a similar way, try to throw it in a circuit first, just the logic hemisphere, and see
Okay.
if it's offline. I would
Mhm.
probably check against AFPCC and deep level switching there.
Okay.
You know, that's one of those weird times when you put deep level switching in the middle of a sentence,
Mhm.
which is a pretty powerful move.
Okay.
Question
Awesome.
there then.
Yep.
CV17, what is that focused on? What is that?
CV17.
Yeah, because you do limbic, you do the entry into the limbic system, then you do the brain pack intro there, which is the anatomy organ, and they go in, then you do CV17, and then you do lip and rip, and then you do the rest of the brain pack, and that gets the working memory. What is CV17?
Let me read it out of the book so I don't muck it up.
And what are the points for lip and rip again?
Lip and rip are on the back of your mastoid bone.
Okay.
And that's all you have to do is touch the mastoid bone. The mastoid bone is very big.
Okay.
Technically a gallbladder point, but as long as you touch the bone, you're getting it. Okay. And let's see, from brain physiology. Just want to make sure I read this correctly. So CV17 is the hippocampus. It's making memories, and you can't make a memory unless you have this pleasure or punishment situation worked out. So in the regular protocol, we do balance motivation by taking out pleasure or punishment. It also is where you will be creating memories based on the senses. So there are two different kinds of memories. There's what actually happened and what I felt about what happened. Those are two different memories.
That makes sense.
And
Emotional,
so,
kind of logical.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but they overlap on each other. So sometimes you can recall how you felt about something, but not the actual memory of the thing. And that's what happens in sexual abuse.
Okay.
Right. So those are two different areas where that's stored. So CV17 is hippocampal. But because it's making memory and you're constantly referencing that memory in order to move forward as a subconscious level, you're constantly refreshing what it was that happened before so you can move forward. It's intricately webbed with survival at the deepest level. So it's going to be the step right before the amygdala. And the amygdala is the one that says, whoops, this is too close to before when we almost died. Shut everything off. Now we run. Or shut everything off. Now you fight. So it's like that step right before where the information is constantly referring to the past so that you don't get in the same jam again. And that can be a real problem, because then when you're not in fight or flight, but say you go into a similar situation, then your brain doesn't learn.
Yeah.
And you're like, I want to be over this trauma and I want to learn this, but I can't seem to do it. And that's because it's subconscious, which is why I think brain integration is just the strongest tool I've ever seen to go that deep. Right? Mariana's like, yeah. Very cool.
When you do the CV, so hippocampus there, do you test the anatomy with that as well, and then gland with that as well, just like we did with the
So outside of limbic, if you don't put in limbic format, CV17 is just an acupoint.
Okay.
Right.
Once you put in limbic format, then you go to CV17, then it's the new format of where you're into the hippocampus there.
Then exactly, because then you're in the limbic structure of the hippocampus. However, let's just take a look at that.
Can you do that for the lip and the rip? Do you check those? Can you check those separately and then together as well?
So if you put in organ and anatomy, you can check lip or rip or them together.
Okay.
I think I'm going to encourage you to always use CC bridge in every single one of those. If you don't use organ and anatomy at CV24, you are looking at a gallbladder point.
Yeah.
So that changes it, but let's just take a look here.
So I did the limbic entry. Do I do that, the anatomy organ and CV24 there, or do I not do that for the limbic open working memory?
You would not do that. That's
not do
the
that.
beginning.
Okay.
That's the beginning of the brain pack that you just described.
Yeah. But so when we're doing when I'm testing the right lip and rip, I do the beginning of the brain pack there first.
No,
You said anatomy and gland, and
give me just a second. Let me think about that. Yes, the beginning of the brain pack is the same setup as the speech points that we were just discussing. That's true.
brain is stopping.
Yeah, organ and anatomy at CV24 is the same setup. But this point, CV17, without limbic, is for wheezing, shortness of breath, cough and blood ejection, spitting of blood, chest pain, goiters, vomiting of foamy drool. I had that.
Hey.
That actually happens when you have candida. It clears the lung, transforms phlegms, loosens the chest, disinhibits the diaphragm. It is the point of the sea of chi. It is the meeting point of the conception vessel with the spleen, kidney, small intestine, and triple energizer channels. So without any formatting, that's what the point does.
Yeah.
And I got that off the points app. But once you start adding any other formatting, like say you added CV17 and gland, or CV17 and anatomy, then you have something going on. Then it's different. These are great questions. Keith basically can recreate brain integration by asking the right question.
Yes.
He's been waiting and waiting for this data so long, his brain has actually conceptualized every option, and he's really close. So
You're ready for bit one, aren't you?
Oh,
he's
yes.
been ready for bit
After I
one.
do the time, yeah.
Yeah, the case study hours.
Nancy,
Yes, dearest.
with MTHFR gene, what? No, it's Bachava.
Hi, Butchum.
I was sorry about before. I
No
thought
problem.
I was having peace and quiet. I didn't have to turn it off, the mute, to mute it. How do you call it? With MTHFR?
Yep.
I feel like there's something that I need to put into a circuit to make it really turn off that mutation.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a piece that I'm missing. I worked on it and it came out good and whatever, but I feel there's something that I need stronger to completely turn off that mutation.
Did you try
What?
the pathogens?
I did. I always test pathogens. I did check pathogens.
And you think it's deeper than that?
Yes.
And you
Unless there are more pathogens that I don't know about.
No, it wouldn't be that. But so something deeper than pathogens, something deeper than brain pack.
I did brain pack.
And what's the symptom of the client?
Well, I'm supposed to do brain pack even if it doesn't come up, meaning I'll do organ plus anatomy, blah blah. And then I'll do, let's say, CCNM, CCB, right hemisphere, left hemisphere, all that brain integration, but I only balance the one that came up as a indicator change.
Yeah, that's correct. So what's the symptom?
What's the symptom? Well, actually, it's very interesting. So I am working on a kid that's behavioral with a whole bunch of different kind of issues. Like the mother doesn't say clear cut, because she doesn't want to say negative on her son.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw his eyes and, his walk and his body movements. Sometimes he twitches. So, and then MTHFR came up. It came up very strongly, and it came up like I even I tested my work after, like, oh, did I do something wrong? Did I not do it good enough? Did I this? Like, I asked myself the questions. And what ended up happening was that everything was good, but for some reason, I felt that it's just not strong enough.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So when we're talking about MTHFR, we have a serious detox problem because of this gene, right?
All right.
And when you have this gene mutation, it is impossible or nearly impossible for the body to detox. And so even very gentle things can cause a reaction in the client, and they can be stuck in this feedback loop of reaction forever, and it makes them foggy like nobody's business. So I'm wondering if we should address the lymph. Do you get an intuitive hit that maybe it's the lymph that we need to add?
It could, I don't remember if with this kid I came up with I know somebody else, I wasn't sure how to address the lymph anyway.
Yeah. So let me give you the formatting for lymph. It's organ, spleen 21. Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat.
Oh,
So the
yeah,
format
please.
is not in any class. So formatting for the lymph system as a whole is organ plus spleen 21 left and right. Although you can check the points separately. Okay, so I wonder if we put in MTHFR as a gene and you just put your hand on the paper with that shows the actual gene and you pause locked and then hold organ in your mouth, or I'm sorry, hold the spleen points in your mouth while you test organ mode. That's how you would test those three things together. So you hold this here and hold organ mode and look for indicator change and see. And so the sentence would say there is a gene and is it affecting the limbic system, the lymphatic system?
Well,
I wonder if we could
I
turn
hear,
it
okay,
that
that makes
way.
sense. Thank you, that makes sense. And in general, that's probably good to go into lymph for most people in general, because most people's lymphs are stuck
That's right.
regardless.
Yeah, we're in a total crisis of the lymphatic system these days where
Because I have someone else whose lymph is stuck. I'm like, I just don't know how to address it. And under lymph, once you're in the lymph, then you'd want to probably hit up on pathogens and allergy.
yeah, but
Anything else?
you just want to make sure that they're not constipated. You definitely don't do
Right,
any
right.
of this stuff if they're not, if
No,
they're
no, right.
Yeah. So say you did, there's a bunch of balances to do here. Say you put in the lymphatic system and then it showed an indicator change. So now you look around for a pathogen. Say you put in the lymphatic system and then go through the alarm points looking for what organs are not functioning. Say you put in the lymphatic system and then use the brain pack. I think for your notes, I would separate them so you can tell what makes a difference.
What do you say? You're saying do format lymph and do pathogens, close the balance. Format lymph, do, let's say, alarm points, close the balance.
Yeah. Because you'll be able to see with your note taking what is really happening there. Because Batsheva is, I just want you all to understand where she's coming from. She has only taken pre-bit, but like Keith, has developed that to an extremely high level, to the point where she's putting 30 to 40 different things in a balance. And she is acting as an advanced practitioner. So this is the way she would take it apart. So you can put lymph with all these things in the circuit, but you want it to be so powerful. So you're going to separate them out.
Okay, no, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And also someone else that I've put in like tons of things. I've done craziness with him, interesting things, including Louise Hay emotional phrases into a circuit, like when I saw things that kept repeating itself. For example, the emotions of the blood come up, but when I test to do the blood alarm point CV22, it does not come up. Doesn't come up to do CV22, and it does not come up to stack all the blood emotions. I think this time when I worked on him this week, I may have gone into the blood circulatory system. I don't remember exactly offhand, but what else would you recommend when blood is constantly coming up?
Did you say
as an
pH?
emotion?
That you looked at the pH of the blood?
I tested if it's the pH, and I don't remember. I don't think that came up, and I didn't know what to do with the pH, but I looked into meaning I have a chart of the blood circulatory system, and I went through the circulatory system to see, let's say, what part, what artery. So it was actually the splenic artery, I believe, that was off. I don't remember more than that right now,
Great.
but yeah, no, I didn't know what else should I do for, let's say the pH. I have a paper printed out about pH and all, but how would I balance pH or test the pH?
You can literally scan that.
Doesn't really say much.
Well, it'll give you the pH things on the side, like 9 down to 3.
Oh, you're saying scan that and
Yeah,
then
scan that. And then you
and then
could,
after
sorry, go ahead.
you scan that, what would you do?
You would just balance that. However, you could go back and scan maybe what foods are causing the pH to be low. That would be cool. So scan that chart because it's usually a food pH chart. So you can scan what to avoid in terms of food. But I think what you would do is, so it's really a blood issue. You've already looked at the pH and you use the blood alarm point.
It's not coming up. I tested it 100 times.
Okay. So
I
you know
keep
the problems
testing
in the blood.
CD22.
Right. So you know the problems in the blood, but it is not. So I would go into spleen here. I would use spleen because the spleen is really cleaning the blood when it comes back from the intestines. And that's how your entire lymphatic system works. So I would look at spleen and I would start to balance the spleen meridian as a meridian balance.
Aha, you're saying when in general with blood or because the splenic artery came up?
No, in general with blood. And then I
Uh-huh.
would, so you know how to do a meridian balance. You would do the spleen alarm points first, right?
Right.
And cross-reference for a pathogen. And then go first and last points and cross-reference for a pathogen, and then find the next priority point and cross-reference for a pathogen.
Right.
You're really going to see what's happening.
I hear. But that's interesting because I told him like there's something also with his lungs, and I said he's not ready for me to work on his lungs. And like I felt I needed to do something first, so nothing. I gave him a whole bunch of things to do. So I told him, let's say to take a bath in peroxide, and I said that might help with your blood. Maybe then we'll be able to coach your lungs. But that makes sense that I should first balance his spleen meridian, which I didn't think of doing, and then he'll probably be ready to balance the lungs.
That's right. So get in the spleen.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Lisa asks, could MTHFR gene mutation plus organ and spleen 21 balance eliminate the mutation? The answer really here, Lisa, is no, because the sentence says how the gene affects the lymphatic system. However, if you got your scan finger all over a copy of the MTHFR gene, you could eliminate that mutation, I believe. It just wouldn't be the sentence. It's just not the sentence you wrote.
I
Okay,
also
okay, cool.
I also had equal. Is it important? Would you recommend, let's say, testing which mutation it is? If it's, let's say, C677 or A128, I don't remember the exact numbers.
Yeah, I would just recommend getting a picture of the gene, which I know you have, right? Just like you
No,
get
that I have.
Yeah.
But then they also have, let's say, the diagrams of, let's say, CCT and like where it goes down.
Yep. So any of the
you would do
things you
that?
can, yeah, any of the diagrams that you can get online about how the gene is working, how it affects the different chemicals, why it's not detoxing, the more intricate you can get a picture that anybody has online, the more you can change. And you can even use priority mode and scan your computer to find out which picture do I want to go with.
Yeah, that I do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no way to know which picture. There's so many pictures of, in general, of anything. There are so many pictures that you don't know which
to go with.
Picture is good.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you put in the gene mutation for MF?
You would look up a picture of the gene mutation and stack it in by putting your hand on the page.
Oh, that's all you do? Okay.
Yep. It's very simple. So unfortunately, beautiful people, I have to go to a client. It's really nice to see you all. Our next version of this is in September on the 11th, I believe, which is a Friday, I think. So I'm happy to see you guys then. And I'm really impressed with you all. Thank you for being in my tribe.
Thank you, Nancy. Last quick thing. Any idea when we could schedule?
Have class. So these people also want class, so it's gonna happen. I'll probably put out a new feelers to see which weeks are gonna work, but we're getting closer, my dear.
Okay.
Please,
Wait.
I'm like stuck. I feel like I can't like have people because I feel I just need that information.
You do. I know that you do. I know that you do.
I know that
Okay.
feeling well.
Plus, Bushava, I owe you a phone call, so I was hoping to call you tomorrow at lunch.
Sounds like a plan.
Get
I'm
a
all
hold
for
of-
it. We'll be in touch.
Get-
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Have a good
Nancy.
one.
My
Bye,
pleasure.
everybody.
Take care.
How do we get a
Bye-bye.
hold of the this recording, Nancy?
Sorry?
How do we get a hold of the recording for this?
I'll put it in an email and it'll go in my on my YouTube. I'm sorry, it'll be in my Dropbox.
But
Okay.
you're gonna be able to email it to us, right?
Yep.
Please.
Just like the last one, I'll email the link.
Okay,
Perfect.
cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great
Take care,
job.
everyone. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Good job. Bye.
Thanks.